This is our logo for our nonprofit research organization, American Primate Conservancy, based out of Mountain Hood, Oregon. Our mission statement, as you can see, is the discovery, research, knowledge, recognition, and protection of this species, whatever it is. And it has to happen in that order, if you think about it. We've been discovering these things fairly frequently. Research has been done, we're collecting data, and we're putting that knowledge together and trying to get to the next step, which is the hardest step, which is recognition. Because without official recognition, we're not going to get any protections for these things. And frankly, right now, it's open season. And so I'll get into how I'm trying to work around that to get some laws put on the books in a kind of an unconventional way. I call this BigFoot Renegades and Rogues Tour. And just a little bit about myself. I know not all of you know me. And so by way of introduction, I live in Welch's, Oregon in the Mountain Hood National Forest, which is very squatchy. We've had reports in that area for some time. We euphemistically call our house the Chateau de Squatch, and it serves as our headquarters for the Conservancy as well. So I served a little over 20 years in the Army, retired about 3 years ago, did a tour of Iraq in the process, and I've lost the speaker again.
Sure, lost it.
Yeah. China. Alright, anyway, I'm sure you can hear me.
Yeah,
we
we
got
got
it.
it.
It'll come on a second.
Oxen.
There we go. Alright, check. Okay. So anyway, that's a little bit, one of the hats I wore for many years. I'm gonna have to sit down over here to get this hooked up. I do hold an associate's degree in multidisciplinary studies and from Grantham University. And I was a Bigfoot eyewitness, an encounter that took place on near Saddle Mountain. So if you're familiar with the coast here, Seaside, northern Oregon coast, we were about 6 to 8 miles inland, east of, obviously west we'd be out in the ocean. So, yeah, that was, this little scrawny guy was me back in the day. What we do is, our mission as combat engineers, mobility, counter-mobility. In a nutshell, what that means is we make sure our movement elements, whether they're a squad or a company or battalion, they get through the path that they want to go. If there's any obstacles, we come up and remove them, generally using explosives in the process. And that's kind of important because that's exactly what we were doing. Okay. It's exactly what we were doing on April 3rd, 1993. And I should preface this by saying I did not believe in the existence of this species at all. I didn't read a book on the subject, I didn't watch TV shows, I was just kind of agnostic. I didn't care either way. But I certainly, it was one of those you have to see it to believe it. And now I'm a knower. So on that particular day we had special permission to go into some private timberland and utilize gravel quarries where they would process gravel to put in on their roads that they punched in various logging operations. And this one time a year, we used full-scale amounts of explosives that we couldn't use on the base without breaking every window. So we'd go up there and we'd practice our skills. We had 3 sites, like I said, and we had detonated the first 2 sites and had just 1 left over. And it was a cratering charge. It's designed to represent blowing a road in half so the enemy can't use it. So we had, I think, about 250 pounds of ammonium nitrate that we'd been soaking in diesel fuel for several hours prior to this. So we get the ammonium nitrate in the ground, we lit the fuses, we had 11 minutes to get out of there and get down to a safety area, where we'd wait for the explosion, go back and check our work. We had 4 vehicles there, 2 Humvees up front, a troop transport, or deuce and a half as we call it, in the third spot. Final vehicle was the commander's Humvee, bringing up the rear. I happened to be a passenger in that second Humvee. I sat directly behind the driver, and it was a beautiful day for April in the Coast Range, to be sure. Blue skies, not a cloud in the sky. And so I had my window down, and because I hunted that area quite extensively for both deer and elk, it was just natural for me to look about the countryside and look for wild game as we're going down this steep logging road. Well, about halfway down to the staging area, we rounded a corner, big wide sweeping corner, and at that, the second blast site, the one that we had detonated a lot of C4 plastic explosive about an hour beforehand, that rock quarry came into view. And as it did, I noted 3 figures down in this gravel quarry. And my first thought was, you know, what the hell are those people doing down there? Because we had not just 1 layer of security, we had 2 layers of security to make sure no civilians got in the area. And everybody's accounted for. We had a standing rule that everybody had to be literally accounted for by sight before we would do anything. But yet here's these 3 individuals down there. And I hardly got the thought out of my mind when I realized what I was looking at were not people at all. They stood 3 in a row. They were facing us, obviously watching our convoy across the ravine. The one in the center, I estimate to be roughly 9 feet tall. The 2 on either side of it came up to its shoulders, but easily 7.5 feet tall. Jet black from head to foot, but it was the profile that threw me, because the arms hung all the way down to their knees. The legs were way too long as well. Jet black, no clothing, but the real kicker was that while that larger one in the middle stood there like a statue, the other 2 on either side of it were doing this. And these long pendulous arms swinging below their knees. And I was in shock. And I'm just, it's like, how can that even be, you know? I mean, this is a true epiphany, and it changed my life forever. And so, I've been researching ever since, but just to follow up, I didn't watch them for 5 or 10 seconds. I watched them for a full 25 seconds. And the entire time they did this swaying back and forth, rocking side to side motion. Anyway, we turned the corner, I lost sight of them, I just slumped in my seat, and I'm trying to take it all in. It's like, you know, a million questions swimming in my head, you know. How could these things have been out there so after my being out there so many times? Never saw a sign, never saw evidence whatsoever. Of course, I wasn't looking for it either.
That's right.
And since, having seen them, it's amazing how much evidence is out there, if you're looking for it. In the past, I would have probably came up to some sort of evidence of just an interesting quick hole in the ground, kept going. But anyway, so I get down there and I instinctively jumped out, I opened the door, jumped out of the Humvee and started jogging back up the hill in the direction we just came from. I was just dying to see them again, because it was almost, one of the range of emotions you go through is once you lose sight of them, you almost go into a funk, a depression almost, because it's like you've seen God, and then it just got yanked away from you just as fast as it showed up. Well, I went as far as I dared. Like I said, we have to be within sight of the main body, and I realized quickly that I would have to disappear of sight, which was a big no-no. But I'm standing on my tiptoes, and I'm trying so hard to look over this dirt knoll that blocked my view of the second rock quarry. When somebody off to my right yells my name, "Hey, Neiss!" I look over, and here comes Sergeant Martin. And he goes, "What are you looking at?" And I said, "Nothing." And he continued to come up to me, and I remember he smoking on a cigarette, and he came right up to me, and he kind of looked to the left and the right, make sure nobody else was in earshot. He goes, "I don't suppose you saw what I saw down at that second last site." And of course I said, "I don't know, Jeff, what did you see?" And he continued on. He described 3 jet black, hair-covered giant creatures, and he said, for lack of a better word, Bigfoot, I guess. And of course, yeah. Then I'm like, oh yeah, saw him. But the thing is, even without that corroboration, it wouldn't change anything. I can't unsee what I saw. And but it was nice to know somebody else got to share that experience with me.
Yes.
And as it would turn out, at that particular time, I was a traditional guardsman, and by that I mean, I would train. I had a Monday through Friday job. I was vice president of a shipping company at the time, but the weekends, 1 weekend a month, was paid for the Army. So this was April. So our next drill would be in early May, and lo and behold, we had 2 more soldiers come forward and admit to seeing the same thing that Jeff and I had seen. So it's a kind of an unusual encounter in that multiple animal sightings are pretty rare, especially with that long a duration. Multiple eyewitnesses are pretty rare, and then just the nature of what we were doing out there. We were blowing up the woods. I mean, the quantities of explosives we used would create a small earthquake and put a mushroom cloud about 2,000 feet in the air. Which is odd, because you would think any animal anywhere near these explosions would be going 360 degrees away from it.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting that after only an hour, not only did these scouts perhaps come to that second gravel quarry, but they literally stood right where all the explosives were. There were little craters on the ground, and they were standing right out in the open. Now, if they were standing with their, against some trees or whatnot, I probably never would have saw that. But he had this dark black figure standing behind basalt rock. And basalt rock is like almost concrete gray, so it's a light gray. So the contrast between these black with the light gray and the blue sky, it was just amazing. And the fact that they came back, no human would do that, because you would not know whether or not we're done blasting or whether there was another bomb coming right behind that. So anyway, that's how I got involved, and I to this day, I still can't get over how 25 seconds of my entire adult life, and I was 34 at the time, changed my life forever. We wouldn't be standing here, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those 25 seconds. Just think about it. So anyway, I've got a couple of things I'd like to discuss. That's me in a little mine shaft up in Saddle Mountain area that I investigated back in the day. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We've already discussed the 93 encounter. I've got some theories regarding Bigfoot camouflage, which I think is very unique, and there are examples in nature that we'll talk about. What I've tried to do this year, based on some things that I experienced, things that I did not believe to be true, but people had talked about, that I ended up experiencing, that, and I put in that woo category, and I have to eat crow because I witnessed numerous occasions something that I didn't think existed. We'll talk about that. So I decided, you know what? There's always a little truth to everything. Okay? And I keep hearing things like, oh, they disappear and reappear. They're going through a portal or they're changing dimensions. And I'm like, the first thing I ask is, show me one animal in nature that we know about that has this capability, and then we can talk. But people keep seeing certain things, so I've decided to start stepping on that third rail of BigFoot research, and that's getting in between the biological scientific side and the paranormal side and see if we can't come together on some issues. Because I do believe they saw whatever they claim they've seen. It's their interpretation of it that I have issue with. So, on that note, we're also going to talk about this Bigfoot eye shine theory. Has anybody ever seen Bigfoot eye shine? Okay, got a couple. That's one that I put in the paranormal category. And again, I had to eat a little crow because I watched it numerous animals 5 nights in a row. And along with it, some amazing vocalizations. We're going to talk a little bit about Bigfoot intelligence. I've got a few theories about that. And let's see. So we're going to talk about that one stage that we're at right now, and that's the recognition part. And that's the hard sell, is to get them officially recognized. And there are methods to doing that. But we'll get into that a little bit. And then we'll go on to our end goal, our end mission, which is to get protections put on the books. I have a short, let's see, oh, well, we won't have to talk about BigFoot, will we? This slide was set up for another conference. I have a public service announcement. You might recognize the individual in it, just giving a support for the Conservancy, and just lastly we'll open it up for some questions. So, how do we take the woo or the paranormal or the supernatural and make it natural? Because let's face it, there are things that we know about today that 100 years, 200 years ago, they thought were supernatural.
That's true.
So, you know, how can we make the paranormal normal? And that's what I'm out to do. Again, trying to balance between the biological, scientific explanations with that of the paranormal. So, let's talk about camouflage. The ability to blend into the surroundings and environment is vital for survival of numerous animal species around the world. Camouflage is one of nature's best defenses and allows animals to go completely unseen in their natural habitats, both helping to protect them from being eaten by predators, as well as allowing them to sneak up on potential prey without being spotted. Nature is amazing. So how can we apply this to our big furry friends? If I were to ask you what color a polar bear is, you'd probably say
White.
White.
wrong. Polar bear doesn't have one white hair on its body. Polar bear fur isn't technically white, it's translucent, and their skin is actually black. If you were to shave a polar bear, and I don't recommend anybody do that, you would see
Without help.
that their skin is actually black. So how do they appear white? The outer coat consists of guard hairs. That is to say that you have a base coat, and then just beyond that, dogs have that, right? So you have guard hairs that just extend a little bit longer than the base coat. And in the case of the polar bear, these guard hairs are devoid of pigment, and they are clear, hollow tubes. Well, why is that? How do we compare that with Sasquatch? Well, I've seen more than one microscopic slide with reported BigFoot hairs samples, where the hairs, some of the hairs, were actually clear. Well, nature just doesn't do that for no reason, and this is where I think we're going with the Bigfoot. Light hitting these clear shafts, similar to that of fiber optics. Light hitting the spur subsequently scatters in all directions, giving the appearance of a white bear, but it's really reflecting its surroundings. Okay? Your eyes are actually interpreting the scattering of all wavelengths of visible light rather than the color produced by pigments. So in essence, we're kind of bending light a little bit, just like fiber optics. I have purchased 1,000 feet of this. This is probably 50 of it. Fiber optics, you can put a light to the end of this, and it will carry it and transfer it all the way to the other end of it. Right? So, this is kind of interesting. The animal solar optical technology includes a complementary strategy. That means the fur traps infrared heat, and it transfers it very efficiently down to the base skin, and then they transfer amongst each other. Their solar optical technology includes a complementary strategy. The fur traps IR radiation of the body's heat very effectively. In fact, so much so, you might find it interesting. You all know what FLIR is, right?
Yes.
Okay, a thermal camera detects heat a bit against whatever the ambient temperature is outside. If we're like 98.6 degrees, if you were out there, it might be hard to pick you up on FLIR because there is no real difference between the background and you. Think of a 12 to 1,400 pound bear that won't show up a heat signature. The animal's almost entirely invisible in infrared vision. The reason behind this is the complete retaining of the thermal radiation within the fur. So they've got a great subcutaneous fat layer, they've got this base coat of hair, these clear shafts are transmitting that heat as well as the light down into the fur. And it's like if I were standing out here, it insulates them so well that the heat doesn't come out. So a 1,200 pound bear is literally almost invisible on thermal. Which may explain our guys as well. I've used thermal when I was in Omaha, on the Omaha reservation, and we had some of this light shine, and I did happen to have my FLIR camera, and I could not pick up anybody. Again, I think it's because they're so well insulated. Okay? Moving on. So I've got a bit of an experiment, which is why I have all this fiber optics. And just by way of a demonstration, just compliments of Casey, bee repellent. Now, my preference is to get a hold of a black bear pelt, but I could use this just as easily. What I plan to do is put this on a stretcher board and put it out in various positions in the forest under specific lighting conditions, photograph it in various places. And then I'm going to go back and cut these guys into maybe an inch or two in length, and I'm going to infuse them through the fur, numbering, who knows, maybe 200 or 300, just a little bit beyond the base fur, and then take them back to those locations under the same lighting, photograph them, and see if that fiber optic guard hairs don't have the same effect it does with our polar bear, But if you can imagine, if they have this capability, they're not only drawing in the light, but they're also drawing in the surrounding colors around them, which would be the ultimate camouflage, right?
Yep.
Kind of like that predator thing, when they stand still, you can't see them, but as soon as they move, you can kind of see a little wave. If that's the case, that this experiment will prove that. And I have a couple other experiments I'm working on in that regard. But that's one of our projects that I'll get back to you on. So, are people seeing these things appear out of nowhere and then suddenly disappear, going into a portal or another dimension? I don't think so. This is that interpretation I was talking about before. I believe they saw what they saw. It's just the way they interpret it because they can't explain it. This might go a long ways to explain it. And a lot of blurry photos to go with it, if you think about it, right? So, yeah, another thing, and we talked about this a little bit, is this eye shine thing. And I said from day one, BS. I've looked at different things, especially after the experience I had on the Omaha reservation. Boy, those lights can stay right as up there.
There he is.
So, about a year and a half ago, I was invited by a friend of mine I kept in touch with on Facebook for about 2.5 years. And he kept talking about this eye shine. In fact, I saw some videos where he showed it, but I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Because, again, name an animal that can do that. And then maybe we can talk. Well, so I took off and flew out to the reservation at their invitation. I spent a week out there. And we went out in the field 5 nights in a row. And by night, I'm talking early morning, because we would go out about midnight is when we would start. And we'd stay out to 2:30 in the morning on a very isolated, remote area of the reservation. Thick hardwoods, rolling hills along the Missouri River. Separates Iowa and eastern Nebraska. Well, we'd go out this area and say, pull over here. A small 2-lane road, no shoulder to pull off of. There just happened to be a break in the guardrail where there used to be an old logging road. So we pull in there, we turn off the lights, we turn off everything. This is Monday night. This was my initiation to this. And we get out there, and I'm like, yeah. We're just looking at nothing dark. It's so dark you can't see the hand in front of your face, right? And so my friend in his native language says, "Oh, hage," which means hello, friends. And sure enough, within about 20 seconds, out of the dark, a set of I look like eyes. And I'm looking at him like, is that what I think it is? He goes, yeah. And a few seconds later, over here, another set of eyes. We had at least one, sometimes two, as many as 3 at the same time. And it wasn't just these glowing eyes, but it was the vocalizations that accompanied them that sealed the deal. Some amazing vocalizations. I was talking with Stan about that earlier. How do they do it? Well, they certainly can't be projecting light, right? Because that would really defeat your night vision. There's bioluminescence. We have examples in nature of animals, even plants, that will put off light through an electrochemical process. Fireflies, for one. A lot of deep sea fish will have their own self-generated light. Photoplankton, if you've ever seen it in the surf, will glow on the surface of the ocean. It's really fun to scuba dive in, because as you go through, they light up when they're agitated. And you go through it and you're like leaving a little trail of light behind you. But that didn't really make a lot of sense to me either, because we don't have any animals that do that. What we do have are animals that, those that can see in the dark, you know, felines for instance, there's a lot of animals out there that can see in the darkness. They all share something very unique. This layer here, it kind of looks like amyloid, doesn't it? Animals that see at night have this reflective layer situated between the retina and the optical nerve. That layer reflects light back through the eyeball, thereby amplifying it, magnifying the light, and giving them the ability to see in darkness. It's called the tapetum lucidum. So I'll just read this real quick. Eyes of some animals shine at night because they have a special type of reflective layer behind the pupil of their eyes known as the tapetum lucidum, which enhances the amount of light absorbed by the photoreceptors in their eyes. It consists of layers of cells containing organized, highly refractive crystals. It is a light reflective surface located between the optic nerve and the retina, like we talked about, and it works like a mirror. This layer reflects light back onto the retina, thereby amplifying it. Okay? Discovery Channel had they still have it out there, there's a series called Earth at Night. And they go around the world, at least 6 different continents, filming animals that have night vision, filming them with infrared cameras, with night vision cameras, very specialized, full color spectrum night vision, not the grainy green stuff that we see on TV. I'm telling you, because I have a similar camera, in pitch black, I can tell you that awning over there is blue, that one's red, trash can's yellow. You can see the whole spectrum of color and very clear in 4K. Whatever they had was 10 times better than I had, but they would go around. And there was one that really struck me was they went down to Argentina and they were filming a mother puma out with her 4 cubs. With her 4 cubs, teaching them to hunt at night. And what struck me of all the animals that they'd been filming at night was this puma's eyes reflected so bright it almost washed out her whole face. I mean, her head almost was just like extremely bright. And then the narrator mentions that the Argentinian puma, you can see their eyes at night without any specialized cameras. They literally reflect that. So keep in mind, we're talking about reflection or refraction. We're not talking about projection. Now let's take an animal similar to that with a camera lens. The larger the lens, the more light it pulls in, correct? So now we're talking about an animal, a species out there that has eyes the size of tangerines. Pupils probably 1 inch wide. Probably get wider at night. They're drawing in light that we as humans are limited in actually seeing, but there's always light even though we can't see it. There's zodiac light from the stars, there's lunar light. Even on an overcast day, there is light that we can't see. Well, the Bigfoot's kind of helping us out because they are taking that light and amplifying it to the point where now as humans we can see them. And if they're staring right at you, they're at their brightest. You're looking right down the barrel. And they're incredibly bright, even pitch black. If they look off, like just to the left of you, that's when you're going to start seeing those orange and reddish eyes, when they're not directly looking at you. So, this is what I think is behind that. We've got these giant eyes that got that huge tapetum, and it's amplifying and reflecting light to the point where we can make it out. And I'll have to tell you, I was just saying about the vocalizations. I've heard a lot of vocalizations over the last nearly 30 years I've been researching. These were incredibly unique. We got there first night, Monday night, and we're getting some of these eyes watching us. And off to about my 10 o'clock, this, what I assume was a female because of how high pitched her voice was. But it was amazing because she essentially was singing a song. By that I mean as close as I could come to, because she would do an extremely loud 5 to 6 second chorus, if you will. It changed in notes, it changed in volume, it changed in pitch and rhythm. 6 seconds of that, and then 10 seconds, nothing. And then she'd do it again. And it wasn't frightening at all. In fact, it was beautiful. I wish I had it on recorded, but it was very beautiful, and it sounded welcoming. She did this 4 times within a course of 60 seconds. Every time she did it, it was exactly note for note, tone for tone, volume for volume, the exact same thing. This isn't some arbitrary random roar, scream. There's a pattern here. Where there's a pattern, there's a language. There's a message embedded in what she was doing. And it would be 2 days or 3 days later, in broad daylight, when I went to, I had to see what this place looked like in daylight. Every time we went out, it was pitch black. And I figured, well, these things got to sleep sometime, right? I got out there, stood where they were standing, looked around for evidence, and all of a sudden, here she goes again. Again, she repeated it verbatim the way she did. She only did it once, and I'm like, wow, they're still up. And so, other sounds, whoop sounds. Real quick, my friend is converted to Mormonism, but he still keeps up with the tribal cultural ways otherwise. It was Wednesday night. We weren't getting a lot of activity. We're getting some, but not as much as normal. And he said, you know what, I'm going to try something. He said, I've only done it twice, but sometimes it works. And I go, what do you do? He goes, I'm going to pray with it. I go, okay. He said, sometimes I get a reaction. So, we're out there, he yells out again, "Aho, Kage! I want to talk with our Creator. I want to ask the Creator for your happiness and your safety, and, because we have the COVID thing going around. So I want to pray for your happiness and your safety for your family. And if you want, Gigo, which means come closer." I'm like, okay. Now they're standing generally about 150 feet away from us, like from here to that tree over there. So we bow our heads, and he begins his prayer. It was only about 3 minutes long, and about 90 seconds into it, from about here to that last table right there, maybe 60 feet away, we get 4 times within about 10 seconds, like 60 feet away. And I'm like, I want to look. But they, sure enough, they came closer. And they let us know they were there. It was just an amazing trip. It really kind of the height of my 30 years of research, because if somebody came to me and said, "How'd you like to see Bigfoot?" "Oh, that'd be great. What if I told you I could show you Bigfoot tonight?" I'd say, right. Now if that same person came to you and said, "Not only that, I can show you Bigfoot 5 nights in a row," I'd say you're nuts. It don't happen like that. Bigfoot finds you. You don't just go out and, so we did. 5 nights in a row from midnight to 2:30 in the morning. Nobody else around. In fact, 2 different locations. We went to a location about 4.5 miles from there. And this gets a little crazy. But I'm taking this rental car. I'm driving. He's telling me where to go. And I should have had a 4-wheel drive. I'm like, I got to turn this thing in. This is crazy. But we're breaking trail, going through these weeds. So finally we pop out on this logging road and park facing down the road, shut off all the lights. And here he goes again. "Oh, okay." 20 seconds, right down the road. Then we caught another one trying to circle around us, behind us. And I'm getting, I'm thinking, I only got one more night to go. I know I'm seeing it consistently, which I never would have believed. But hey, we got to step up the game. He's been doing this. He's established a relationship with them for, by this time, 2.5 years. They know him. And I looked at him, I go, you know what? Have you ever thought about just walking up to him? And he goes, no. That's crazy. Crazy white man. So I said, they know you're here. They know you. And if they ever wanted to hurt you, they would have done it by now. I said, you should just walk up. No. He's like, hold my beer. And don't follow me. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe it was the beer. But I walked. I'm like focused on his eyes, a set of eyes straight down the road. At this point, maybe 140 feet or so away, here to that other tree. And I'm just going down. I can't even see the road. I'm hearing these leaves crunch under my feet. This was October. And I'm getting closer and closer. And I'm like, okay, idiot, you didn't think this through. I was standing against ground initially. And I don't know what I would have done if it stayed there right up to the end. Who knows? I think my backup plan was if I got it within about 25 feet, I would just take a seat and let them make the next move. But I got within about 40 feet of the thing before it finally turned and said, I'm out of here. It left, but he still talks about that crazy white man. But I had to do it. I don't know what I was thinking.
Did that
It
screw
could
up
have gone any different way. Yes.
Did that screw up any future encounters for
No.
him? Good.
No, we went out 2 more nights after that and had the same. Very consistent, amazing. Still trying to wrap my head around it, but I think I've got a possible answer right here.
Yep.
Okay? We have examples in nature. Hang on. I just want to emphasize, it is not, there we go. We are talking about refraction or reflection, not projection. I can't emphasize that enough. There are no laser beams firing out their eyes. So, moving on. I've been asked on numerous occasions during some podcasts that I've been doing. I've done about 42 interviews this year alone. Oh, we're going the wrong way, sorry. So what about Bigfoot intelligence? Are they smarter than us? Are they dumber than us? Well, when we think about intelligence, we measure it as IQ or intelligence quotient. I'm convinced there's numerous different ways to measure intelligence. The IQ, or what I call AIQ, which is academic intelligence quotient, is talking about things like calculations and mathematics and science, things that they don't need. So does that make us smarter than them? No, because I believe there's something else out there. I call it PIQ, which is primal intelligent quotient. Or street smart, if you will. When considering Bigfoot intelligence, it's important to differentiate between academic intelligence and primal intelligence. Book smart versus street smart. Human intelligence is the mental capacity to learn, understand, reason, including capacities to comprehend ideas, plan, solve problems, and use language to communicate, generally measured in the form of intelligence quotient. We're talking like arithmetic, analysis, cognition, and other advanced academics. My theory, we're talking about academic intelligence, or AIQ, versus primal intelligence quotient. Who's smarter? They're two different things. PIQ consists of essential basic instincts, enhanced sensory perception, and advanced survival skills. That's our guys. Over time, humans, we used to have PIQ, we used to have primitive intelligence quotient, and we surrendered that over the years to technology, to convenience. Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, the Dissonians, they all had PIQ. They knew how to survive, they knew how to create fire, they knew how to shelter and collect food and hunt and gather. We've lost that, folks. We've lost it. And we've done so willingly. We have become technological dependents. When considering whether AIQ is superior over PIQ, the answer depends on situational conditions. Survival of the fittest. Folks, if they drop, God forbid, a electromagnetic EMP bomb over the United States, all of our electricity is gone. Even electricity in batteries. Transmission of any sort of electricity is gone. We no longer have refrigeration. We can no longer pump gas. Everything that we've become dependent on is going to come back to haunt us. They don't need any of it. It's not even going to affect them one iota. So who's really the smartest? Who's the most intelligent? It depends on the category. So we both get a win, I guess, but don't discount them because they watch us, they observe us, they're curious about us, and they can learn from us. But they will always be the final. I think I did that. So recognition. This is kind of cool. Formal recognition is critical in order to enact laws to protect the species. Whatever. How does that happen? There's a couple different ways. Ultimately, this would happen through the auspices of what's known as the International Union of Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, which is based in Stockholm, Sweden. These are the folks that have been given international permissions to not only monitor the health of various different species, but they have what they call the red list, which is, it's not just threatened or endangered. There's 9 categories. We'll go over them here, from in great shape to extinction. And what's really cool is there's a couple categories in that red list that leave a door wide open to recognition of this species. Technical extinction does not mean the last of a species to die, because let's face it, there's only one left. There's not going to be any more very soon, right? In fact, it can get down to just a few hundred, and they are technically going to go extinct. The gene pool gets too low. There's all sorts of diseases. The immune system gets compromised. You have mutations, and that will lead to the gene pool basically imploding on itself. And that's why I think it's important, because we don't know. I hear people say, oh, leave them alone, they're doing fine without us. Well, okay, Smarty, tell me. How many are out there? I don't know. But they're fine. How many were there 100 years ago? 1,000 years ago compared to today? I don't know. But they're okay. Leave them alone. They're fine. That kind of ignorance has led to the extinction of so many animals that we already knew existed. By the hundreds, we have photographs of the Tasmanian tiger or the passenger pigeon. You know, the passenger pigeon died out when they were in the trillions. They had flocks that would blacken the sky. They were shot for fun. One town would radio or telegraph to the town, hey, we just blew half of them out of the sky. They're coming your way. Get ready. The last passenger pigeon was named Martha, and it lived in the Cincinnati Zoo. They tried crossbreeding with other pigeons to try to save the species as best they can. It didn't work, and for the very first time in history, we know the exact date, place, and time that a species, we watched it. So, ignorance like that is not going to help our cause. I think it's important that we get something out there on the books. So, move on here. So, we'll get into this. Okay, so let's talk real quick about the 1973 Endangered Species Act. I've read nearly all of it. It's really boring, but I'm going to save you some time. There are actually some passages in the Endangered Species Act that provides the opportunity, it fits these creatures to get protections enacted even without a type specimen, even without formal taxonomic credentials. This is right out of the Endangered Species Act. It says, quote, "The authority to list a species as endangered or threatened is not restricted to species as recognized in formal taxonomic terms." It's in there. They can enact protections of a quote-unquote species, even though it hasn't been taxonomically identified. It also says the act is intended to authorize listing of some entities that are not accorded the taxonomic rank of a species. And that's where the IUCN comes in. They're the ones who get to create those binomial taxonomic names, Homo sapien, Homo erectus, what have you. Let's talk about this red list. I should probably have switched those slides, but this is the UCN's red list. So, we have extinct, oops. Obviously, no known individuals remain. The second one is extinct in the wild, saying known only to survive in captivity, and we've seen that before. Third one, critically endangered, extremely high risk of extinction in the wild. Endangered, high risk of extinction in the wild. Vulnerable or threatened, high risk of endangerment in the wild. Near threat, likely to become endangered in the future. Least concern, lowest risk does not qualify for a more at-risk category. Now these next two, pay attention. Data deficient. Yeah, they can categorize a species as data deficient, not enough data to make an assessment of its risk of extinction. And lastly, not evaluated, has not yet been evaluated against the criteria. Our guys fit in those last two categories. So there is a place in the animal kingdom with regards to the red list. But I want to delve a little bit deeper into this data deficient. It goes on to say, one which has been categorized by the IUCN as offering insufficient information for a proper assessment of the conservation status to be made. This does not necessarily indicate that the species has not been extensively studied, which they have, but it does indicate that little or no information is available on the abundance and distribution of the species. That's our guide. Recommendation, this is their recommendation. Avoid classing a species as data deficient when the absence of records may indicate dangerously low abundance. Threatened status may well be justified without having everything there. In fact, in 2016, for the very first time, the IUCN gave a taxonomic binomial status of a subspecies without any type specimen at all, strictly on the basis of a photograph. Now, if you stop getting these blob squatches and get some really good shots, they have done this. But it has to be very clear, and when they can see, hey, this is something that we don't have, they can step up and do something about it. So technical extinction, again, the species extinct when the last of its members die, but functional extinction, the species disappears from the fossil record or historic reports of its existence cease and reduced population no longer plays a significant role in the ecosystem function, or the population is no longer viable. And again, this can be as few as a couple hundred left. There are no individuals able to reproduce, or a small population of breeding individuals will not be able to sustain itself due to inbreeding, depression, and genetic drift, which leads to loss of fitness. We talked about that. My advice, best practice, is err on the side of caution. Okay? My concern is these things, as we get more and more encroaching into their territory, we're starting to divide them, possibly separating family groups and isolating them to the point where they may actually end up in this situation. So that's what the conservancy is about. Let's talk real quick about protection. We're almost done. These reclusive creatures appear either unwilling or unable to coexist with modern humans. It is highly likely that they will continue to retreat into the most remote wildernesses as a means of survival. Of concern is the very real possibility of them becoming more and more isolated from others in their own species, thus diluting the gene pool. Ultimately, extinction will follow. The mission statement of the American Primate Conservancy is the discovery, research, knowledge, recognition, and protection of this rare species. And that is why we advocate proving their existence before it's too late. So one of the things that we're doing in terms of protection, people have gone, different groups have gone to like the Department of the Interior, which controls BLM, they control Fish and Wildlife, the Forest Service. They all fall under the umbrella of the Department of the Interior. People have gone to them, hey, save the Sasquatch, whatever, and the Canadian version as well, all to get the door slammed in their face. So we've decided to approach this from a different perspective. And that is working together with Native American tribes. Now let's think about it. We've been around here for about 300 years, give or take. They've had to live symbiotically with these creatures for the last 23,000 years. And they know them very well. They have a tremendous history with these things. So who do you think knows more about it? But then again, here's the white man saying, stupid Indians, what do they know? It's just a tale, exaggerated, whatever. Well, this gives the Native Americans a chance to not only protect these animals and bolster their culture, because these things are all throughout their culture, but it gives them kind of a way to stick their thumb in the eye of the invaders, I guess. But I think when you look at a map of all the different tribes, these are all the tribes in the United States, and this doesn't even count Canada. These are Indian reservations. They're not tribes. A lot of them are consolidated reservations, but they are literally all those orange spots you see there. Those are literally nations. They're given national status. We have foreign nations, or they might call us foreign, but we have nations dotting our country, and they have complete autonomy on those reservations. They get to make their own laws. They get to make their own rules, their own natural resource calls. They have the authority to list these creatures, and I think it's to their benefit that they do, because again, it bolsters all their culture, their stories that they've been talking about all the time and being told, yeah, whatever. And now, working with 5 different tribes currently, I've written an initiative draft, and I won't bother you with all of it, but in the case of, say, the Omaha Nation, they call Bigfoot Taunter. So I titled this the Omaha Nation's Taunter Protection Act. And it's really kind of a plug-and-play template. It basically puts teeth into, hey, when you're on our res, these are the rules, and we're protecting these things. I can probably get y'all copies, or I can send you this, but you can take out whatever the tribe name is, plug in your tribe, you know, the Shawnee Nation, BigFoot Protection Act, or what have you. You can put it whatever name, you take out the Tonga, whatever what they call it, it's the Omaha, whatever, and customize it for their own purposes. And again, I believe if we can get this going, I think it'll catch on between the tribes, not just here but in Canada, that they're all gonna, I think they would agree, hey, this is a good deal. You know, they can tweak it the way they want to, I'm just giving them some ideas, but, and then of course BigFoot, yay. Sorry I didn't bring Marty this year, that's our big inflatable gorilla. He's sitting on a pallet outside of my house, but just didn't have time between my trips to New York and Virginia last week. I had 2 days to get ready for this, so we left Marty home. But I'll try to get him here next year, okay? So now, a brief PSA from somebody I'm sure you all know, that's just helping support the Conservancy.
Hi, I'm Peter Byrne, author, explorer, and honorary member of the American Primate Conservancy. Have you ever wanted to look for Bigfoot, to hunt for Bigfoot? Well, now you can. Visit AmericanPrimate.org to find out how you can help. It's a great cause. Together, we can solve this mystery and help to preserve these magnificent creatures for generations to come. Thank you.
So Peter was kind enough to do that PSA for us, and I really appreciate it. So again, this is how you can contact us. AmericanPrimate.org is our website. AmericanPrimate@AOL.com is my personal email. If you have any questions or whatnot, please do not hesitate. So speaking of questions, anybody have any questions
Oh,
about
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, the third and fourth GI witnesses, you said that they came forward. Who did they open up to? Just the two of you or somebody else? And what happened then?
Well, it's interesting because, again, I thought Jeff and I were the only ones who saw it.
Yeah.
And the wives or girlfriends of guardsmen, when we have our drills, they'll set up like a little bake sale table, bring baked goods and raise money for you know, family picnic or a Christmas gathering, whatever. So they do that regularly, and you come in the front doors and they're kind of set up a table in the foyer there before you get into the drill floor. Well, two soldiers. Well, what's funny was when I had the very night after I had seen these things, we had what they call an open post, which we didn't have to stay on base. As long as we reported at the right time next morning, we could go stay wherever we wanted to. So I stayed with my first sergeant and his wife at their house, and it's the first time I told anybody about what had happened. And yeah, I got a lot of this, yeah, that's interesting. You know, not condescending, but you kind of like, okay, because you know, they know me. I'm not a person that usually prone to coming up with crazy stuff like that. But so Lena, my first sergeant's wife, was manning that table with some other gals, and she's now telling them. And again, I think of what are the odds? She's discussing what I told her the month before with the gals at the table. These two soldiers walked in the front door heading to the drill floor, and they heard Bigfoot.
Aha!
They said, what did you just say? She, I was telling them about Sergeant Neiss and Sergeant Martin's encounter. They said they saw 3 Bigfoot, and they looked at each other and said, we saw them. They saw them too. And they've never gone public about it, and I'm not going to push it, but yeah. I asked Lena, I go, did you get their names? I don't know if they were in green.
That's in her narrative.
Joe, you have a question?
Sergeant Miller and one of the other sergeants have come to this very place to listen to Todd. And they, it's no big deal. It's not an after, anybody that knows anything about military blasting knows that there's there's always inspectors that come in to make sure it's done. That was already done. So, there's no question.
Yeah, you always have an AR after action report after all.
After action.
Yeah, yeah. Anybody else? Yes?
Not to get too far in the weeds, your fiber optic experiment you're planning on doing. I was an IT guy for the last 30 years. How are you planning on cutting the fiber optics? Because you're saying.
I haven't really thought about it. Is there a special way to do that?
Well, the other question, kind of on that, is what type of fiber optic cable would you get? Multi-mode is for short distances, like less than 50 feet. And single mode, those are the ones that are buried, for long distance transmission. And usually they cap out at about 2,000 feet before they've got to do a splice and have a booster and things like that. And what I'm wondering, maybe even suggesting, is that when you're cutting them, don't cut them square.
Okay.
Cut them at an angle. The sharper the angle, the better.
Really?
Because there's shielding around the fiber itself that prevents internal light from escaping.
Exactly.
And so if you can have more of an ellipse, you're gonna get the higher frequency bands, like a cat's eye, it's got the slit so it can get the right frequency. So I'm thinking it's just like, and I'm just literally was thinking about this while you were talking about it, is that the longer you can make that ellipse of a cut, the more likely you're gonna be able to collect more light.
That's good.
Potentially,
Thank you for
potentially.
sharing that.
It's hard. Have any other nations besides the Omaha Nation been initially approached about the idea of doing this as a legal action?
Yeah, Warm Springs is a confederated tribe. I was fortunate enough 2 years ago to literally run into and become friends with the chief of the Inupiat tribe up in Alaska.
Yeah.
And we keep in touch. In fact, he and his sister are both on our indigenous people's board. We have a specific board for indigenous people, and they're heading that up. But anyway, we got 5 that we're initially working with.
Well, I have a friend who's the attorney for the Confederated Tribes in Coos.
Oh, yeah?
And she's actually also one of our commissioners. And so, permission to talk about it with them.
Sure.
Okay.
I can. If anybody's interested, I can shoot you the rough draft of this
I'll email you.
initiative.
I'll email you.
Yeah. Just email me again, AmericanPrimate@AOL.com. I'm not one of the 3 guys that still use that. But, any other questions? Going once.
The one species you said in 2016, is that the Tasmanian tiger?
What's that?
The one species you said that was recognized without viable proof?
No, it was actually called a bee fly. It was a subspecies of other bee flies,
Okay.
and whoever got these pictures, they never brought the specimen in, but they got some very clear looks at it. Sent them on to the IUCN, and they said, stop the presses. We're going to accept this simply based on a photograph. But I think that's important, because what we're doing, I mean, if you can accept something this size on a photo, you sure the hell should be able to accept something much bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Thank you.